And they try to hide that fact. And when you walk in and you say the UCC, you'll hear judges play off a script that they've been given saying the UCC doesn't apply. Yet, when you go into a criminal court, for instance, on the top of a complaint, a charge, a criminal charge, it'll say Uniform Criminal Court Docket, a UCC docket. So the UCC is the only place you have to register. It's called Notice by Public Registration, and you only file into a UCC. Well, UCCs are hard for most people to even get. It's a whole language above and beyond itself. So in order to make sure that people didn't make a mistake and spend a lifetime going through what Scott went through or others went through, we were able to go in under God, Allah, Yahweh, source, first source, whatever you want to call it, and register everyone's being, and it just collapsed everything else. So
okay,
it is applicable everywhere.
So this is already in place, and it isn't like people have to go and sign up for anything. It's already in place. They just have to become aware of it, basically.
It's already in place. The only thing you guys have to do now is just be and do what you be. So this document that Scott, Ken, and Chris worked on, it's beautiful because it says, here's a courtesy notice. You've already been noticed through the proper public registration system that you all were registered under. Now, here's a courtesy notice because you're personally going to be responsible now. That's the only thing you guys have to do. All the rest was taken care of, and it was done by the OPPT for you guys to be able to be.
And like this can even stand up in court. I mean, what you're basically doing with this courtesy notice is you're letting people know that the terrain has now changed and that the rules are now different.
Well, it's not even a court anymore. It's you and the judge, and the judge is on his personal liability.
Yeah, you're operating in 100% liability with everybody.
There's only three things left.
Lisa, you have to understand what the court is, though. Anytime you step into a court, it's a private court. It's not even a court. It's a private corporation. So if you do the same courtesy notice to them, you know, I have documents that purport to be a summons or a complaint. I would be happy to comply as soon as you can show me the same things Scott asked the quote-unquote Commonwealth of Australia to show, which they refused to do. And you don't have to ever step into that court. You guys can't control whether they're going to make a choice to be corrupt. What you can do is be diligent in keeping a track record of their actions, accepting their actions as their admission of their corruption, their choice to be corrupt, and a co-actor.
No, excellent. So,
you know, Max, by using the UCC, which is the same harvesting tool that they were using against us, is really important, because for them to deny it and to say that it's invalid or it has no relevance, they're also denying their whole harvesting system, which they use to base their tax collections, all of their foreclosures. They're all using that same mechanism. So to deny the filings would be to deny their own selves and their own system, which they use against us. So it's really a catch-22 that you put them in that position.
It's kind of a checkmate for them, isn't it?
Yes, it was a very fun experience, for me at least.
So what do you say to people who say, well, yeah, okay, it's all very well that you filed this, but how come the system's still running?
Yeah, the system, the energy's been cut off from the system. Energy in every form of representation, meaning all of the paper that they had, they can't use it. The gold that they had, that's all been essentially reclaimed and rescued and cached away so that it could have a chance to recalibrate itself for this upcoming moment. And all of the energy that you see is just the energy that was in the tube, so to speak, when the OPPT cut everything off. So they're running on the last bit of energy that was in their engine already.
Yeah, and they're kind of doing so because a lot of them don't actually know that the system's collapsed. So what do you say to people that say, "Oh no, this is terrible. This will bring down the system and usher in the new world order"? That's what I've heard some people saying. What do you say to people like this?
Well, I say that the precautions have been taken. We considered all of that. That's why the CVACs are there. If there's a corporation that the people are going to be said they're a part of, well, they should own it. You know, they should have a system that's transparently of service to them, accountable to them. So the CVACs were set up just as a temporary, here's where you can place everything transparently by your own will and free will choice. However, you know, I've had this in place. The OpenT had it in place back in the end of November. And our first choice was to go in and recognize everybody and give them the data. Instead of going in, making the systems of assistance, treasuries, and cutting paper everywhere, and then having that paper be negotiated behind closed doors with banks or anybody else, it was important to have the people be and do. So it's all sitting there. There's nothing, it can happen in a twinkling of an eye. There's no void, no gap, no anything, but it's up to the people to choose whether to be, and it's okay to move along and kind of not know how to be. That's normal after what we've all been through. We help each other.
What it seems like what you've done with the CVAC is you've basically left the infrastructure there. You've said, well, basically, we own all this. We paid for it, and so now it's there. We have to decide what to do with it. And for people who need the security of the system, well, it's still here. It isn't like it's gone anywhere. It's just that we are now back in control of it.
Yeah, there's 194 branches, I think. The only branch that wasn't established as far as mirroring the old system was the one for the Vatican.
Okay.
Yeah, the two things that the trustees did, there's sort of two parts to the equation which completely overlap. One was to gather together the financial system and essentially collapse it and take that value back for the people. And the other was to actually put forward the if you like, the skeletal form of a new structure of we don't want to call it government or even governance, an assistance, a system of assistance is, and if anyone can think of a really neat term for it, please tell us. That has also been put before us, and it's, as Heather said, at the moment it's sitting there, it's holding its place because it contains all the value from the old system. And the thing that I'd like to put to your users is that's actually the most important thing. I wouldn't focus on the foreclosures because that's a fact and it's done. Hard to get your head around, took us quite a while, but what follows is by far the most important, and that's the most important part of the conversation that you can have at this stage. Now, if you've just come into this, there's a bit of cognitive dissonance in suddenly being in a landscape where there's nothing but us, the planet, and the creator, or everything else is literally stripped away. You need to kind of sit with that and think about it for a while, and one of the ways that you can digest it all is to go and read some of the CVAC specifications on the People's Trust website. There's some incredible descriptions of transparency, of integrity, equality, equity. It's remarkable, and it's never been seen on this planet before.
Okay, so like, what if someone was, they've heard about this and they're at something like, they're at Doubtful Creek at a coal seam gas protest. The police have arrived, they're trying to ship them on, the people there trying to protect the water table, and the police have come along and they're protecting this corporation and they're just pushing the people out. What can you do in a situation like that using this type of a trust, what you put in place?
Handle the police officers the courtesy notice, for one.
Okay, yeah, that's what I would say would be the best thing to do. What if they say, this doesn't mean anything, I'm going to arrest you anyway? You say, well, okay, that's fine, we'll deal with it down the track.
They just became your first customer.
Yeah.
Yeah, what you would do is, as long as you know the names, you have to know the names of the individuals. If you have the names of the individuals, you just serve it on them the next day. If they throw it in the mud, that's fine. Serve another copy the next day and make the point that they've committed you harm by manhandling you. If you were manhandled, they're not entitled to do that. And if it was your farm they were on, they were actually trespassing and damaging your property. And they have no right to do that either, so you can begin that process.
And you'd begin that process by putting, a commercial lien on them?
Well, in fact, the process that we're using in the document that's been produced is based along the principles that Scott used, where we as an individual are pulling up this other individual because they're doing us a harm, and we're saying we're not going to interact with you except on our own terms, and here are our terms, and if you do any of the things on this list over here, I'm going to send you an invoice. Oh, and by the way, if you persist in this, my second option is a UCC filing against your personal assets, because this is you talking to another individual. There's no corporation in play, even though they think there's one. So the courtesy in this is the fact that you're not jumping all over them with a commercial lien to start off with. You're giving them a chance to cease and desist without getting too hot and heavy over it. Putting liens on people is a serious business. And we think a lot of the issues will be deflected by this notice first, and hardcore issues, obviously, they'll have to go to the lien stage. And that is a direct attack on their personal assets. They could lose their house.
See, the reason I'm asking this is I'm trying to put it out there because a lot of the people that will be listening to this will be, oh, this sounds all very great, but how can I apply it to my personal life and the activism that I'm involved in? So I'm just trying to get people to understand that they can use it in any of these situations. You can use it. So it is such a beneficial thing. I mean, it really does seem like the light at the end of the tunnel. It almost seems too good to be true.
Max, it's one of the first questions that came up for us when we were doing these shows was calls and emails and requests for how do I use this to stop chemtrails? How do I stop it to use fracking? How do I stop it to use fluoridating my water? And I'd love Heather to address it because there's a lot of activism going on right now for a lot of different reasons all over the world.
Well, and okay, these are great points because it comes down to the point of being, right? And the point of doing. There's so many people being and doing out there that you don't hear about. And that's part of their agenda, is to distract people or make sure that information doesn't come out. So I had an email the other day from a person that was being and doing by the UCC process, by the way. And he was a manager of a financial fund, a trust, and they buried him in a maximum detention facility to keep it quiet, along with a whole bunch of other people that have been being and doing. So I don't know if you guys have seen that movie, The Guardians. It's a kids animation film. They had this globe where all these lights showed up, and each light represented a child that believed. And each of these lights would just go out as the kids stopped believing. And their job was to basically make that globe light up again. And I really believe that if people know how much being and doing is going on, and they're able to have a visual representation of that being and doing where they can click on those dots, those lights, and see a blurb or a summary of that story, they may have more courage. You know, when I was in the investigation, I was in a courtroom, and the courtroom is just a theater, and everyone's playing their part. And at the time, I was an officer of the court, a registered licensed officer of the court. And I had 2 hearings that day. And I had been forewarned by my banking contacts that they were going to use that license to essentially throw me in contempt and into jail. And so I canceled the bar license because I knew I couldn't use it to clean things up from within. So I canceled it. The best way I knew how to help was to walk away from that old system. And that next morning, went up and had prepared the night before saying, you're a public officer, you should have a bond and an oath per your own statutes. And the judge got very upset. I wouldn't let it go. I was strutting around the courtroom, playing the part to the hilt, and he called the cops up, the sheriffs, who I had worked with as a prosecutor for many years. And the sheriffs were all standing up there, and I said, perfect timing. You guys came in. I gave him the statutes for them to be able to do their job. He's pretending to be an officer of the court. He doesn't have his bond and his oath. He says he admitted he didn't have his bond and oath on the record. I asked the court reporter to replay it back. She just looked flabbergasted and frustrated, turned beet red. The judge turned beet red, and the sheriffs just sort of shrugged. Well, I said, okay. So we went through the whole scenario. Everything finished. The judge stormed off the bench, granted the bank their thing. The court reporter actually stopped reporting. She refused to report anymore. And as we left, I knew I had the next hearing to do, and I knew that the bank handlers and the bar handlers were going to be on the phones with the judge that was just handled, as well as the judge for the hearing coming up next, to figure out what to do. And I knew that the sheriffs would be called back up. However, my question was, would the sheriffs actually come back up? because when they don't perform their job, it's a felony under their own laws, right? So we go in there to the next hearing, and essentially all the judge could sit there and do after her little rant and rave was turn to me and say, what happened? You used to be one of us. And she was a go-to judge for the bank, and she was beeping for the sheriffs. Her and her clerk, it was funny, they caused such a distraction because we were beeping for the sheriffs, and yet they weren't showing up.